each other. So we're happy to be here. And Gary sent out an email to me, Pastor and Craig, and Booker about a month ago. He said, man, June is Men's Health Month. And you can have a whole lot of money. You can have a whole lot of everything. But I hate to tell you, if you don't have good physical health and good mental health, what good is it to have? And one of the things we want to make sure that we have good physical health and we have good mental health. So we have some people who are going to come and talk to us about both of those. So I am excited to be here, and what we're going to do, Pastor Marvin Evans is going to come and open us up in prayer, and then Pastor Norman is going to come. And how many y'all look at him? He still look the same. He don't look no better. So Marvin is going to come pray for us. Then we'll hear from Pastor Norman, and then we'll hear from our mental health expert first.
Not wrong. Pastor Hawkins, say hello to the internet audience, please.
Well, hello to the internet audience. We're excited to have you guys here. We're just a couple of men at First Baptist Church on the Broad, trying to get a little bit closer to the Lord and trying to live a little bit better. We're happy to have you guys here, and you can type in some questions if you have them, and we'll do the best we can to answer them for you.
Shall we pray? Most Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Father, we thank you for once again allowing us to meet in your name. Father, we pray that something will happen today that will help us to be safer and better men. Father, we just thank you for last week. We thank you for today. Father, we thank you for our families. Father, we ask that you would keep watch over us, watch over our children, our wives. Father, we just pray that you will always keep us and that we will always keep you in our heart. Father, we just thank you. Father, we ask that something will be said today that we can take out into this world and make it a better place to be. These things in your Son, Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, I want to first of all say welcome again and thank you, but I want to say something about your leader first, because I want to say something good about your leader. And if you can think of something good about it, text me real quick and I'll say it. But now let's give Nyrone a hand. Nyrone has done an excellent job. And I say this because in the beginning of the pandemic, I charged all of our leaders and staff with simple goals, which was keep people engaged and keep them connected over whatever means and opportunities we have. And you've done that. Men have had a regular man cave virtually, and then other activities and events. And it's been because he's been consistent. Some of you are in the Sunday school class, and some of you, I've seen him on the golf course at Sunday school. So, but he's consistent, and I appreciate that about it, because it never has been about numbers. It's never been about, hundreds of men or thousands. It's been about those who would be there. And so Nyrone has done an excellent job, and he continues to do an excellent job. So I really appreciate him and the work that he's doing. I wanted to give you a quick update on church, and I do this at most of our meetings. We're doing small engagement meetings now, like this, in preparation to return to worship. Right now, we still know that the coronavirus variants are in the land. The Delta variant, which is proven to be the most deadly one, or the one that's easiest to contract and grab hold of people, has shown up in the Memphis area. We had 10 cases of it this week. And the people who are unfortunately impacted by it the most are African Americans. 78% of the cases in the last 2 months have been among African Americans. 63% of those cases have been 68% have been among African Americans 45 and under. And then of that, there have been males that have been impacted. So young African American men are being impacted by COVID at a very high rate. Not being vaccinated is one of the leading causes, not being able to prevent it. And so when we start trying to integrate and return to worship over the next few weeks and month or so, one of the things we have to do is figure out how protected. We don't want anybody to get COVID. We have seen people who had it. We have seen people who have succumbed to it. And it's not something you want to play with. We know the impact of it. And again, it's harder on African American men than any one particular group, largely because of other comorbidities. It is not because of the virus alone, but typically because there is some other issue like diabetes, like coronary heart disease or artery disease, or other high blood pressure related type things. So if you have one of those things and get the virus, it tends to impact you very hard and very harshly. Kevin Phipps is back there. We attended the funeral of one of our classmates just a few weeks ago at Brown Baptist Church, where Rick Harrell comes from, because he was a young man. He had diabetic issues and weight issues, but when he went in for coronavirus, he could not overcome them. He succumbed to them. So we're making plans. You see a lot of work. I commend Dr. Reverend Craig Freeman for the work that he's doing. Craig is always looking out for us and making sure we have everything that we need, from sanitation to seating and arrangements and charts. It's a lot of work when you try to take 70,000 square feet of space and make it usable for as many people as possible in the safest way possible. So a lot is going on. We do have a schedule of trying to return to worship. It is not in the month of July. It is not in the around the corner kind of thing. What we want to do is let the 4th of July pass, where it's a large gathering holiday. We're letting Juneteenth pass. There's a lot of folk clustered up in the park downtown. I saw them yesterday, drove by there, I looked in. There's a lot of people that's sitting a lot closer than y'all are right now. So we expect that there will be a slight uptick between now and the 4th of July and possibly Labor Day. And right after that would be the most opportunistic time to look at returning to church in some small scale still, with modifications, possibly a Saturday and 2 Sunday type services. And so we'll definitely be looking at that. We'll definitely be making our way back, so you'll know what's going on. Finally, let me say this, as Rick prepares to come up, and Nyrone may want to come back and introduce him more effectively. I'm going to run to a funeral. The Birchfield family, Mrs. Mabel Birchfield, her brother passed, Mr. Robert Young, who has attended church here with us on a regular basis. He almost tried to get Nyrone to come over there and be the pastor of the church at New Philadelphia. But when Nyrone went over there and folk wouldn't say amen, they were saying, hey man. Nyrone told me, he said, you can't pay me to go over there. At one time he was preaching, they said, say man, I'm like, so it was a tough church, a tough crowd. Philadelphia gets a pastor every 2 years, or 2 every year, something like that. And so Nyrone decided he would stay here. But Robert passed, and I'm going to go over and assist that church and assist that family in their hour of grief and time. But certainly I appreciate all of what you're doing. I appreciate your financial support of this church. Listen, when men lead, when men are consistent, when men stand up, you can't help but to have a strong church environment. And it has been the men of our church who have given gifts and made sure that we have been able to prosper throughout this pandemic and make sure that everything worked and was working well. We haven't had to lay off staff. We haven't had to cut services. We haven't had to do any of that because you have been supportive of your church. I want to thank you for that. I want it to be from my heart, my lips to your heart. I don't ever want a day to go by where you feel like it's being taken for granted and not being thought of, that we appreciate you. So to those who are on the internet, God bless you. Thank you for tuning in. Pastor Hawkins is going to come back and share with us the order of the day. Or Rick, I'm sorry, we're not in Montgomery. I'm sorry. Rick Harrell is a certified counselor and a licensed practitioner in the area of mental health, has been leading that charge for African American men with our sheriff's department and other places, has recently formed his own counseling service, really long overdue, because if anybody can effectively talk to a black man, it's another black man. He walks like us, he talks like us, he looks like us, he falls out with his wife like us, he get cussed out by his wife like us. He know all of the stuff that we know, and he been through all this. I see some of y'all nod your head like he my new best friend, amen. So Rick is just one of us, and so without any further ado, those who want introduction don't need them. Those who need introduction don't typically want them. Rick, come on up. Let's give him a hand so he can share with us and ask questions. Listen, you have a highly qualified professional in front of you. There's no shame in anything. And basically what you can do is do it like this. Alan, if you have a question that you want to ask and it seems kind of tough, right? Here's what I would do. Lean over and whisper something into Dennis. Go ahead, lean over. All right, and then do it long enough so people can see you. And then come back and raise your hand and say, Dennis told me to ask. Do that, and we'll be all right. Listen.
Pastor didn't let the mic down.
No, we got a box. Hold on, it's a box. We want you to Now, see, I wasn't going to make no short joke. Rick, no, I wasn't going to do it. That Lord, I wasn't going to do it.
Wow. Good morning, everybody. Man, how y'all doing this morning? Good. So glad to be back with you. I actually remember some faces from the Zoom session that we had probably a few weeks ago, a month ago it seems, and I really enjoyed that. Let me first of all just say I'm so happy to be here. I just want to thank Pastor Hawkins and the men of First Baptist Broad for allowing me to come back to talk about this really important subject. But I also want to thank the senior pastor of this church, Pastor Keith Norman. Pastor, doctor, vice president, scholar. He has a whole lot of titles. Y'all know, y'all blessed to have a pastor like Dr. Norman. He's a man who I admire, and I look up to him. And
I get cussed out by my wife. All the time.
Yes, I look up to him, and he, like I said, he didn't want to do any short jokes. I look up to him physically, and I look up to him as a spiritual person and a spiritual leader too. So just glad to be with you being here today. I always say my mom and dad used to always say, people don't have to be nice to you. So they choose to be nice to you. People have to invite you to their house. When they invite you to their house, their home, this is your home, to invite me here, I'm truly humble and grateful for this opportunity, especially to talk about a subject as serious as mental illness and mental health, and especially men's mental health, which is something that's not really talked about in our communities, definitely not talked about in our churches. And I know one of the things that your pastor does is something that he definitely talks and preaches about here at First Baptist Broad. I think it's something that Pastor Hawkins, he and I have talked about on many occasions, how it's a subject that's really overlooked in our community. I want this session to be as interactive as it needs to be. So I want you to ask questions. Pastor Norman is correct. I'm one of you. I've gotten cussed out by my wife. Me and Pastor Norman just talking about our wives. They meet on a frequent basis. I've been trying to figure out what they meet about. I asked y'all, you know what Alicia and Karen meet about the conversation? I'm having lunch with Alicia today.
Hey, this is being recorded, so y'all, it's on the internet.
Okay, it's on the internet. Well, I'm going to say it anyway, because I really want to know what they're talking about. I got a man cave, he got a man cave, so it's okay. I want you to just share today a little bit of the history, behind mental illness. Because there are a lot of stigmas that come along with this particular subject, and their stigmas are in a lot of ways they're validated as to why Black people don't get help, and why we don't seek out therapy. Some of the same reasons we don't, many times, black men don't go to the doctor about our physical health. So those stigmas and those fears are very real, and they're based on a lot of history. Let me just talk for a moment about some of the history related to mental illness. Mental illness has kind of been around and really being studied in depth, maybe a little bit over 100 years. It has not been around in terms as long as medicine has been around and research, due to the fact that we just didn't understand it. Back in the mid-1800s, the medieval period, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, things of that nature, they kind of looked at it as being what we considered demon possession. So a person was talking to himself, or a person's mood would go from a manic state to a depressed state, is because he was full of the devil, okay? Or there were demons that possessed him. So some of the techniques and the ways that in fact would address that particular issue would be that we would, if we would pray the demons out, they'll go away. So they would chain these people to the fence during the mid-1800s, medieval period. They would chain the fences and to doors, and they wouldn't let them come to church, but they would preach to them and pray for them from the pulpit and from the church. The demons would leave. Well, that didn't work in many instances, where they would then, now we would say we would scare the demons out of these people. So they would tie people, hold them over a pit of snakes, and would let snakes bite at them or bite them, and that would take the fear of snakes would shock the demons out of them. Well, that didn't work. So we would put them in a tub of ice, freezing ice. And the whole goal would be to freeze the demons out of these people that would talk to themselves and who would suffer from what we call now bipolar disorder. And that did not work. So when we look at this whole area of mental illness, we can trace it all the way back to even the medieval period, but even before that, we can even trace it back to the Bible, although we didn't really call it mental illness then. In the book of Matthew, if you remember around the 17th chapter, it talks about a man who brought his son to the disciples to heal him because he was, as some Bible scholars say, he suffered from seizures. Some Bible scholars say that he was possessed with demons. Some Bible scholars say, recent Bible scholars say that it was really probably mental illness. I'm not really sure whether it was seizures, mental illness, but he brought him to the disciples to be healed. They couldn't heal him. So Jesus comes and he asks the man, "Can you believe?" The man said, "I believe, Lord, but help my unbelief." So Jesus heals the boy. Some scholars state that the child did not necessarily suffer from seizures, but they were in fact mental illness based on the behavior of that particular the child, the behavior that was being exhibited. I'm not sure what it was. But it brings us to this particular point now, to where we still don't understand it. All is still being researched. The Bible that mental health professionals use is called a diagnostic statistical name, which we call the DSM-5. It's been changed about 5 times because we're still trying to figure out certain aspects of certain behaviors. What does it mean to be a schizophrenic? What does it mean to be bipolar? What does it mean and how we're treating those things with medication and with therapy? So the field of psychology has made different transitions throughout various hundreds of years and decades and even up until now. One of the reasons why we do not, the mental health still has a stigma placed on it because of the research that's been behind it, but also because of the researchers that have done the research, especially in the Black community. Well, understand the field of psychology in itself is a racist field of study. And what I mean by that, and I think I shared this with you in the Zoom session, is that the fathers of psychology, you've heard of Sigmund Freud, have you not? You ever studied Sigmund Freud in school? He was not only a psychologist, but he was an MD doctor, he was a psychiatrist. You may have heard of also Sir Francis Galton. Sir Francis Galton was a psychiatrist, psychologist as well, philosopher, who believed in the whole theory of eugenics. Does anybody know what eugenics is? You know what eugenics is? Eugenics is that he believed that black people's DNA was defective. And because of their defective DNA, they were inferior. Inferior meaning that they were less intelligent. And really it was a way to actually justify genocide amongst black people. Because they were not needed. They were less intelligent. They were they were inferior to white people and other races, especially whites. And so, therefore, they should not even exist. Have you ever heard of the philosopher called Cesar Lombroso? He studied in criminology. He believed that criminals were born. And you could tell a criminal by his high cheekbone, facial structure, his wide nose, and big lips. Who was he talking about? Black folk. And then, of course, you had Sigmund Freud, who also believed that black people were inferior, less intelligent, had a lower IQ. These were psychologists. These were people I studied in my field for years and still study. And they were considered the fathers and godfathers of the movement. So when we talk about white supremacy as it relates to mental illness and even other medical issues, understand in the field of psychology and mental health that the stigmas were in fact placed even then because they placed certain stigmas on black people. Therefore, various studies were being done on black people. Y'all know about the Tuskegee experiment. A lot of black people had some reservations about getting vaccinated. A lot of it comes from those particular situations and that history. And these particular fathers of psychology are a big reason why, even today, play a major role as to why we don't get the help that we in fact need. Because, as Pastor just stated before, it's important that, and I believe this when I'm around my white counterparts, and I tell anybody that goes to see a therapist, if you look like me, you need to go find somebody that looks like me. Looks like you, you need to find somebody that looks like you. Because our kids in schools are being misdiagnosed with ADHD, and a lot of these diagnoses that I don't even believe that really, I don't really believe as a mental health professional, believe in the ADHD. I know it's a field that, I know it's a diagnosis that we're getting overdiagnosed and our kids are being put on medication for it in schools. And it comes when we consider a disability. In the school system, it takes about $10,000 to educate each child. But if I can give your child a diagnosis of ADHD, then that's another $5,000 to $6,000, $7,000. So it's become a money racket. The medication for ADHD is like a $30 billion industry. That's why our kids get misdiagnosed. If you have children in the school system, they want to put your child on some Ritalin, some Adderall, but simply because the child will stay in his seat. He won't be quiet. And I found when I've done therapy with these type of kids, I find they're very smart. They're very smart. They can play a video game all day. But they're supposed to have attention deficit disorder. And my argument with that, and I've had arguments even with the school system, that no, it's not a attention deficit disorder or child disorder, it's a teaching disorder. If you're a teacher, you think that just because every child's coming to school to learn, then you're not a good teacher. You think every child is going to stay in his seat, then, or you want to just, every child's going to come in here and make straight A's, you don't have to do no teaching. That's not teaching. So our kids get misdiagnosed and overdiagnosed with some of these disorders that really, in my opinion, it's important that you go and take your children to a therapist who's well versed in it, but also a therapist that looks like this. Because many times, many of the school psychologists don't look like the kids that they're diagnosing. Many times, when people are getting diagnosed, they're not getting diagnosed by people that look like them. So it's so important. But there are some real facts as relates to mental illness, y'all. That's why we're here today. It's very real. Depression is very real. Schizophrenia is very real. I work with patients all the time who talk to themselves. I work with patients who suffer from bipolar disorder. These disorders can be genetic, but they can also come through various types of trauma. And there are some major facts that we need to really understand that's very real, in spite of what the history says, in spite of what the racism, the institutional racism that exists as relates to mental illness. 1 in 5 people in the United States suffer from mental illness, some form of mental illness. 1 in 5 people. And that's about 51 million people in the United States that suffer from mental illness. Now, I'm going somewhere with this because I want you to understand we want to bring it home to the church. And what is the church's responsibility? Most mental illness are very serious mental illness, like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depression. 1 in 20, according to the National Alliance of Mental Illness, says that 1 in 20 adults experience a serious mental illness each year. That's someone that's being, whether they're diagnosed or not diagnosed, they're experiencing mental illness. And do you not know that the second, does anybody know the second leading cause of death among black people? Do you know what that is? Suicide. The suicide rate amongst black men has increased over the last few years. Used to be a time when we said, black folk don't kill themselves, but that ain't true. We killing ourselves. And because many times of the trauma and what black men deal with, just being a black man, that's stress in itself, just getting up every day, being a black man in this society. So there's trauma, there's stress that you put on top of that, the various things that may go on in a person's life. Sicknesses, death, other grief, losses, trauma. And it's about 50, and most of those suicides happen between the ages of 15 to 24, but we found that the suicide rate actually, the chance of suicide actually increases as the person gets older. So these are things that are actually happening, not just in the black community, but they're happening in the church. So, black people make up 13.4% of the U.S. population. So out of 13.4%, about 16% report having some type of mental illness in the past year. So the research is not very clear in terms of what it gives us a U.S. population of a data, a statistic as it relates to the U.S. population. But the research is not real clear because there's not a lot of research on the black church and mental illness in the black church. Why do you think that is? I'm asking a question now. Why is it we don't have a lot of data to support why research in the black community or in the black church is not very clear?
Somebody said it goes unreported.
It goes unreported. Why do you think it goes unreported? Because even in the black community, we don't report it like we used to. We're reporting more of it now. But why is it in the black church? We bring it right to home to the church. Why are we not talking about it? Why is it not being reported in the church? Yes, sir.
Oh, here you go. I got your mic. You want to go to here? I get my steps in.
Well, I think one of the reasons may be because, most black families have a lot of pride and a lot of secrets. And there's a lot of stuff that they don't want people to know about what's going on in their family. You know, when I was growing up, my mother used to always tell me what goes on in our house stays in our house. So I think the reason why a lot of people in the church report stuff that's going on because they don't want nobody to know that this happening.
Right. Great answer, exactly right. You know, one of the things that, and what is I commend the man cave and the men here at First Baptist Broad for doing is having these kind of conversations, because it's one that it has to be had, because mental illness has always been in our communities, y'all. We just have never addressed it, and we never really talked about it, like I said, because we don't talk about what goes on in the home. But the reality of it is, do you not understand that a lot of the mental illness exists right here in the church? Are you aware of that? You're not aware of it? Huh?
Not surprised.
Not surprised. And you shouldn't be surprised. I told my pastor, Brown Baptist, everybody gets up and starts shouting and hollering and screaming and run up and down the aisle. It ain't because the Holy Ghost called. I'm being real. I'm going to say some things that may offend some people in here today, because I'm real passionate about this. But if I'm wrong, you can show me where I'm wrong. I invite you to stand up and say something. Everybody's screaming and running through the church. It's not because they got caught the Holy Ghost. We have people who are suffering with unresolved issues and trauma in their homes, like you said. And the church is that place of refuge that they're coming to release. And you have to understand that the church has always been that cornerstone of the black family and home. I know faith and religion, all that, that's a top priority in my life. Because I was raised in the church. My dad was a pastor, I'm a PK. So it's a big part of my life. But what we have to understand, and I see, this is a very alarming statistics. Like I said, I do my own research in terms of the 20-some years that I've been doing this type of work. I found, Kevin, that 95% of the clients that I see that experience trauma is coming to me. When people come to see me, they're not coming because everything's going okay. It's something wrong. 95% of the people I see that come to see me, I think I shared it in your Zoom session, they profess to be Christians. So when I had this conversation with pastors, I'm like, that don't believe in addressing mental health from the pulpit, don't believe that it's a time we don't talk about these kind of things in church, we don't have man cave meetings about these kind of things in church. Ask the preacher then, what are you doing? What are you missing? Because your same people you preaching to, they come and see me for therapy. They go to church every week. They're Wednesday night prayer meeting every day. They're on the prayer line every day. So what's happening? Why is prayer not helping? I have not had a preacher that helped me understand that yet and answer that question. We are not, in fact, addressing this issue the way it needs to be addressed, and understanding, dispelling the stigmas around what's going on. There's about 80% of the women I see, and men too, maybe about 6% of the men, this is my research, Kevin, and I'm pretty sure if we were to do real research and data inside the church, we'd find that it's very real. Most 80% of women I see in therapy, you know what? They have been abused, they have been sexually abused or molested. By the time you're 6 or 7 years old, I see your hand. Men, we really don't like to talk about that. But we have men who have been molested. And when we talk about 1 in 4 people, 1 in 5 people experience mental illness, there are people, let me make it look clear to you. So you can take this with you. There are men in First Baptist Broad that's been molested. There are men in Brown Baptist that's been molested. But it's taboo. We don't talk about it because, that ain't really, it ain't a man thing to do to say my cousin touched me at 6, or my daddy molested me at 12. And that's why we said, sir, over here, we don't tell our business in the household, them secrets in the household. Well, who wants to tell that? You don't want the preacher to know you've been molesting your child. You want the children to expose those type of things. That's a thing that we've done that's wrong. It's inappropriate. We need to tell what's happened. We need to address these particular issues. Yes, sir.
So you're bringing up, my name is Kevin, by the way, you're bringing up what's called adverse childhood experiences.
Yes, sir.
How do we get to that and expose and pull that layer back to get those kids to help? Because those kids grow up.
That's right.
And they repeat and reproduce those experiences.
This is why we have to do just what we're doing today. Because you said, see, it's only common to and human to parent the way you in fact parented. There are things that my dad, how he parented me is how made me the man I am today. Now I have to admit there was something that my dad did that I wouldn't do with my child today. My dad was parenting where, he got whooped with an extension cord. I got whooped. Y'all remember something, don't you? Huh? And you remember this whooped extension cord. Now, it straightened me up. I ain't gonna lie, it straightened me up now. Huh? No, but you whoop your child extension cord, then what's gonna happen? You going to jail. You know what? And we ain't had no cell phone back then, Kevin. Your child got a cell phone now, right? That's right. You call the folks on you. So, we have to change some things. And don't get me wrong, my dad I don't consider that was abuse because he was doing what he thought was right. And at that time, that was the culture. When we're talking about other types of abuse, that physical abuse and the sexual abuse, of course, if you're doing those type of things and those kids are going to, in fact, those adverse childhood experiences, it's only going to be natural that they, in fact, do the same thing to their children or some other child. So we have to understand that you're going to repeat that behavior. So how you pull the cover off of it? Yes, that's a question. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, my name is Alan Myers, and I was just talking about piggyback on what my brother said over here about things that people don't tell. Mm-hmm. If you can think about way back when you had all kinds of homes that had Uncle Charlie, Aunt Mary in the back room that never came out.
That's right. That's right.
Because I know at my house, mm-hmm. we had Aunt Mary. She stayed in our house for years.
And we hear that Aunt Mary from everybody, didn't we?
Matter of fact, she had to live in my room. I had to sleep on the couch.
Right.
And she stayed back there. She never would come out.
Right.
And she had problems.
Right.
I know that now, but I didn't either. I was just mad because I didn't have my room.
Right.
But we've got so many homes now that have people with these mental illnesses calling it something else.
Right.
He just get mad all the time. Why?
And sir, you made such a profound argument because we like to say, he crazy. No, crazy got a diagnosis. They ain't know he crazy. No, something's wrong. We gotta stop using those type of terminology because he may be schizophrenic. We gotta recognize in the church is one place where you're gonna find that a lot of you probably got I call them mental health consumers. They're gonna come inside this church because they're looking for a place of refuge. They're looking for help. They're looking for answers. And we have to be able to become more knowledgeable about talking about this stuff so we can recognize it. One of the things I try to educate my pastor on when I used to serve on the ERT as a security team is that they didn't know how to deal with the mental health people that come out the street. They know how to deal with it. Well, you didn't recognize the signs. Some things you're not going to let them in your church. Well, men walking around, a true sign, you don't see anybody in the heat of the day in July, June. They got a heavy coat on, skull cap, blue, and everything. They walking, they push a basket. That's a sign of someone that suffers from schizophrenia because they can't tell temperature. And it's not because they don't feel hot. The only way you know you're hot or cold is your mind tells you whether you're hot or cold. It's not what you feel or touch. So their mind, there's a chemical imbalance in the brain where they cannot, in fact, decipher temperature. So until I tell a person that comes up, that guy that comes to the church, he had a heavy coat on, it was July hot. We let that man get up in the church. Well, that should have been stopped at the door. Now, that person did have a weapon on him once they got inside the facility. But once he got inside the facility, it really was too late if we didn't care. If somebody hadn't caught it before then, it could have been a bad situation. So it's a lot of reasons as to why the church has become more knowledgeable and become more aware and increase their awareness of what mental illness is, not just for the sake of an individual, but for the sake of the congregation as a whole. But what we do is many times we ignore it because we just simply think this person needs prayer. No, this person needs prayer and medication. Need more than just prayer and therapy. Yes, Kevin.
Well, Rick, I just want to piggyback. I had the opportunity to work up under your leadership when you said preach our service, and you started the treatment program, and I was a supervisor. But we had this class called Balance and Prevention. Yes. And this is thing you mentioned about how stuff happening through the family. And what I found out when I was the instructor of the class, that most of the abuse that the men committed was because of what they learned from their fathers,
yes, sir,
and grandfathers.
Yes, sir.
And we used to always talk about that. And a lot of times, even through the jail, when we came up with the assessment, trying to make sure, because you know that's the fact, we work in the jail, people have come through the jail, misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. Right. And we're arresting people, and they really, I'm an opponent that, you know, if you do your crime, you do your time. But we also need, there needs to be a component where there's need to be treatment for them. But just want to bring back that I had, like I said, I had the opportunity to work in the funny unit, and I learned a lot because a lot of times, because of the abuse that the men were committing, just like you said, it's a lot of, and you know, I had pastors in that class, right? And that was preaching in the pulpit on Sunday morning, right? So, I think that was the dangerous thing, that you got somebody standing in the pulpit preaching, and then they're going home beating their wives at night. So,
Kevin, we didn't just have, we've had some prominent preachers. Yeah. Okay. I won't call them the prominent preachers in the program. I won't call them that. It wasn't Pastor Hawkins. It wasn't him. Well, they said, well, we'll get that straight. But yeah, but that's the thing too. You know, we as I heard one of my preacher friends say, even when and those things like domestic violence, that stuff is not dealt with in church, from the pulpit. As my one friend said, he said, if a preacher is preaching about something all the time, he's probably struggling with that thing himself. But if he don't never preach about it, then he is God. Okay? And that came from a preacher friend of mine. So when we're not talking about some of these things, you know, what's really going on? Domestic violence is very big. It happens inside the church. So, you know, what is the church's, and I'm going to ask this question, what is the church's responsibility? Since the church is a place for healing, and it's a place for refuge, it's supposed to be a place of refuge for people, what is the church's responsibility as it relates to mental illness? Do we have one? Or should we just ignore it and pray about it?
Well, that's why we have you here today. We know that there's a problem, and one of the things we want to do is address it. But I have a question because one of the things you said that jumped out to me when you said just being a black man waking up every day is stressful.
Yes,
it's stressful within itself. So for us as black men, what are some of the one of the things that I think that we suffer through a lot, and it's even worse than having married or somebody in the back closet, is men going through depression. Yes. And really not knowing that they are depressed, but just saying, you know, how many times have you seen people, well, I feel a little off? Well, guess what? If you feel a little off for 2 or 3 weeks, that's more than feeling a little off. So what are some of the pitfalls and what are some of the signs of depression? And then can you tell us some ways to work through it?
Yes. Depression, as I stated earlier, is a very big issue. And it's an issue that a lot of black men suffer from quite a bit. Some signs of depression, it's like you said, Pastor Hawkins, you're depressed for long periods of time, then now we're talking about clinical depression. Everybody has bad days. I mean, days you're just not going to feel good. You may have had something else happen in your life that may cause you to, to be depressed. But if the depression goes on for long periods of time, then we're talking clinical depression. And there are various signs. How do you know when you're depressed? Well, you pretty much don't find pleasure in things that once brought you pleasure. That's one thing. There can be a loss of appetite. And overeating can be a sign of depression. For me, I suffer from depression in a different way. A lot of people look at anger as being depression. But it was. It's anger, it's depression expressed outwardly. And so my anger was a form of depression that I never thought it had anything to do with depression. But most of that depression comes from somewhere. It's first of all understanding where is it coming from. Is there a chemical imbalance in the brain that's causing it? That could be one thing. Because depression can be genetic as well. But then is there trauma that has never been dealt with that may be causing depression? When we bury things in our mind, back in our subconscious, trust me, it's gonna come out. It usually comes out in negative ways and exhibited in negative ways, and we don't understand why we're doing what we're doing. Yes, sir.
Yeah, again, my name is Darryl, and I just wanted to address what you were saying about what should the church do.
Yes.
First of all, on most large churches like this one, you got people with all sorts of professional backgrounds.
Yes.
Okay, doctors, lawyers. So I think first thing you have to do is you have to recognize it. We have to train our people to recognize mental health. The same thing with suicide prevention. And that is the start. And then we need to have a team that can pull those individuals to the side and just start talking to them, asking them questions and different things like that. There are so many different reasons why people are mentally depressed, like you said. I mean, just growing up alone can be a major factor. But another thing I wanted to address was sleep apnea. How does, because if you don't get enough sleep, and I have sleep apnea myself, you feel like you've been up about 24 hours a day, and you just don't feel the same. And there's a big difference. And so I'm not sure if that has any relation to any kind of mental illness, especially if a person doesn't know they have sleep apnea, for example.
Yeah, you're asking what again?
I'm asking, could having sleep apnea have an effect on mental health?
Yes, I do believe. There's some research behind that. And I actually can't remember where I read it or where I read it from. But it will. I don't know what's going on in your situation, but if you got sleep apnea, you're not getting enough rest, then it does affect you mentally as well, because it can even be related to depression too. The person can become depressed by that, not getting enough sleep. Because you're dealing with the other stresses of life, you're not getting enough sleep, then it's just like also I had a heart attack back in 2019. Had never been sick in my life, never been on any kind of medication. And when I got diagnosed with that particular issue, and I started having to take medicine, now that became somewhat depressing for me. Because I'm like, why gotta take this medication? Now I'm doing something. Now I understand that the medication will help you live, but if you never take it, you're 50-something years old, now you've had some life-altering situation take place, that can bring about depression. You start thinking about why I gotta do this. So yes, a lot of depression can be related to a lot of things. So in your situation, it may not be depression, but can it be related to it? Is anytime we have some type of illness or some type of condition, you can probably relate some other mental issues to it as well. But there's some research on that, but I can't remember where I read it, but sleep apnea can be associated with something.
I do know that you can't function properly.
Exactly. You cannot. Because you can't think properly, because you're not getting enough rest. So you're not going to think effectively.
In your profession, when does somebody need to come and see you? Should I wait till everything is falling apart? When I'm on my last day, and I ask that question because I know at the last man cave, we had somebody to ask that question, and the answer.
Good question.
Yeah, how you explain it to them is really great.
Good
Because
question.
a lot of times that's what we do in life, you know, especially as men, you know, in our men sessions, in our Sunday school class, we talk about it. We try to be the big, strong person. We put everything on our shoulders, but guess what? I don't care how big you are, your shoulders aren't but so strong.
Right.
And normally we wait till everything break down, and once everything break down, we say, okay, I'm gonna go get some help. So
Pastor, you answered it. You know, what happens is, in most cases, when men, especially men come to see me, it's bad. They waited too long. So when you come, if the right thing would be to come when the issue first starts, the initial phase of whatever the issue is. When most situations, people come when it's just real bad, especially in situations where I have couples or marriage type situations. Many times a man will come, especially the man initiates it, it's pretty much over. And one of the things I do in marriage therapy, counseling, ask a question, because the number one question I'll ask in a situation, I'll ask, what is your level of commitment to this marriage in terms of saving this marriage? On a scale of 1 to 10. Person tells me it's an 8, 9, or 10, and I say, well, let's do some work. Person comes in and tells me, well, I'm a 1, I'm a 2. I said, session over. We're done. Because what happens is, the therapist is doing all the work, and the couple ain't committed to anything. So that's what happens.
Yes, sir. One more question for you. My friend Kendall here, he brought this up as a great point. What happens when I'm not trying to be big pastor. This is serious. So what happens when an individual knows there's something wrong, but they don't have medical insurance, medical coverage? There's only so much a person can do outside of that.
That's such a big issue in our community, is that we have so many people who suffer from mental illnesses and issues, depression, schizophrenia, all those things. And we do not have resources in this community like we should. That's a real big pet peeve of mine of so many people, especially black people. You know, somebody asked me this question this week. Y'all remember when they used to call the crazy place Parkland Dunlap? They were sitting down at Parkland Dunlap. That was a mental health hospital down there where people who did not have insurance to get those type of services, they got rid of that. And now you see a lot of our mentally ill people just walking around, they're not getting service. The biggest mental health facility right now, nowhere near in Memphis. Who said it? The jail. That's sad. People are having to get services in the jail because when they get locked up, they have a constitutional right to receive mental health as well as physical health. And they will commit petty crimes to get services. You know, when I was working in jail, we had people who had physical ailments like cancer, diabetes, and they got insurance. So you know what, I go and steal something so I can go to jail and get my needs taken care of. And let the taxpayers pay for that. That's a flawed system. It's sad that it's that way. And you'll find those same people who are mentally ill, they're very physically sick as well. So, where do they go? Yeah, they go to jail, I guess. Mostly those people can't afford services, so it's sad.
And I know that if you go to the emergency room, they have an obligation to see you, but that's just for that moment.
That's it.
They're gonna release you with the quickness. So
Release you with the quickness. So you haven't gotten the treatment,
right.
the therapy that you in fact need, and so it goes untreated. Yes, sir.
How you doing? My name is Daryl Johnson.
How you doing?
And I guess my question is probably more inquisitive than anything else because we do have a vehicle, the man cave, to address what I'm going to ask. But I'm 64 years old, the 15th of July. I come up I see someone with gray hair, through the black and white bathrooms and doctor's offices and this, the segregation type of stuff. And it's just lately with the visual medium that we have, seeing all these police killings of unarmed blacks, mostly men, but women, children. And I just find myself thinking about that a lot. Whenever I see a police car, I just find a feeling coming over me I used to didn't feel. Although I come up during that era, we used to hear it all the time. But this visual medium puts it in our face all the time.
Right.
I'm just wondering, how much of this do you hear or have you heard? Because I just feel an angst to want to talk about it. And here again, like I said, we have a vehicle that we can do this here.
Right.
And I haven't used it yet, but that's one of the things that I just want to talk about it, talk it out. And how do we go from day to day, knowing that we could possibly meet this situation? How are we going to handle it? Even though all the things that we said that we need to do, we've gotten shot and killed.
Right.
Every single thing.
Right.
So, like I said, just this latter part of my life, seeing this in my face,
Yes.
just that thought of being a victim of that type of thing happening.
Right. You know, what you bring up is so important. Something I've been in some of the same meetings talking about this relationship, mental health. And when Pastor Hawkins first asked me to come this time, I was like, what would I do? I do something on suicide, depression, why can't I just group it all into one big? Because mental illness and mental health goal is so broad. It's a broad spectrum. That's one aspect of what you just named that we're all dealing with. If you're not, if it doesn't do something to you mentally and psychologically to see the situation that's been happening in our country and what happened with George Floyd and the number of killings that are happening with black men. I did a session on this at Brown Baptist, and working in it does something for me. I retired from the Shelby County Sheriff's Office, and I know what goes on. I know what goes on. And what you're just saying is that it could be you next. The last question I asked in that session I had at Brown Baptist, who's next? But this is something that's not new. Like you said, it's been going on a long time. Now we're seeing it a whole lot more, and it should do something to us all mentally and psychologically. Because the reality of it is, it ain't by accident. These killings are on purpose. And so, these on purpose killings, and you know what? Everybody not killing just beating the heck out of some folks too. They're doing that a whole lot in our communities. And the thing that's much more sad about it is that, there's a question back, well, you got black officers on the police department? I said, yeah. And that makes it even more sad because of the fact, I know that those black officers, they'll let a white boy go into a black community and beat the heck out of black folk. He won't do nothing about it, they participate in it. I've seen this, okay? But then you let a black guy try to arrest a white person that they're finna get rid of arrest, they handle him with care. And they don't let that black boy jump on that white man. It's not gonna happen. So that should affect us all. I just said, just waking up being a black man every day brings about stress and mental distress. That's just a reality. So that's why we experience depression and things of that nature. Because what we don't do, we don't talk about it. We don't release. We don't have things like we have right here, like the man came to share these things with each other. And when we do, we internalize it all, then it begins to affect us in ways that are exhibited in negative ways. Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Clyde. I've been dealing with depression for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And mine's come through sadness. And it's simply because of a sick child.
Mm.
You know, being daddy, wanting her to get better, to do better, having to answer all the questions. Why? My daughter, back in 2000, she had a stroke. And she was at the prime of her life. She was 21 years old. Well, since then, I've been the only male figure in her life. And she has gotten better over the years, somewhat, but she wants companionship. And my answer to her is, baby, just keep praying. Keep talking to Dad. See, this is my first time ever talking about this in a forum like this. You know, I have a friend where, you know, I can discuss this kind of thing.
Right.
But that's difficult. You know, I have to deal with this every single day.
Yes.
of my life, and it is very difficult. And then I want her to be more independent and do things on her own, but I have to be there to do them with her because I'm a primary care person, doing that. Right. And then on top of that, I have to deal with, I want her to be independent, but her mama wants her to still be her baby. She wants to protect her. And then we kind of fall out a little bit because I feel she don't need all of the protection that you want to give her. She needs some independence. So I appreciate this forum. I appreciate the man cave. And like I said, this is the first time ever that I've spoken on this situation, outside of the friend. Right. And I do really appreciate everything that you said today.
Thank you. We appreciate you sharing.
Rick, and that's one of the things right there. And I think if we don't get anything else, if we forget everything that Rick said, I think this is the important part. And this is what we want this vehicle to be able to do. For people to have a revenue, a way to be able to share. I always say this about our men in our Sunday school class. We are different people. Women can walk into each other in church and say, girl, that hat look good. Where you get them shoes from? And by the end of the service, guess what? They best friends. Now, if mom would walk up to me and come, man, that's a nice tie, your shoes look good, I'll be like, man, what's wrong with dude? He keep walking up to me every Sunday, talking about my shirt, that's not what we do as men. So guess what we have to? We have to provide space for us to be able to discuss issues. Let me ask you a question. Don't you feel a little better? You said what's on the inside out loud. There nobody knows what that one, and there is, what's that called? It's called what? Therapy. And you ain't got to get no bill from him. You got a little therapy.
You got that for free. You
got some free therapy, but that's what we have to do. And I'm going to probably have one more question because we got to get Dr. in here because he may have to go do some surgery on somebody. Quick. We got to get on tight schedule. But it was one thing that I learned when I first got to First Baptist that has really helped me. One of the things that Pastor Norman said, you have to have men of accountability in your life.
Right.
You may not have a therapist. See, you weren't going through a therapist, but you had a person of accountability in your life. You had a person who you could talk to, and you knew that whatever you deposited in them, that it wasn't going to go nowhere. Imagine if we had some people like that in our lives. So we have to have men of accountability in our lives. So we can deposit some stuff, because guess what? Everybody's not going to, let's be real.
That's right.
Everybody is not going to go talk to rehab.
That's right.
Everybody is not going to go talk to a therapist simply because of that stigma that's associated with it. But just having a person of accountability in your life is an amazing thing. I wouldn't even imagine to know that he has been going through depression, right, and not having to talk to a professional, but just the mere fact that he had a man who he trusted that he can pour into, and he knew his business wasn't going to be in the street next week. Man, that's the best therapy he could have ever got. Because without that, Dr. Harris, without that, what was the prognosis? I said, without him having that outlet, what could have been some of the prognosis?
You get all the other stuff, the depression.
You mean I can start smoking and drinking and running the streets, doing everything
all this part of it.
to get this stuff out, man, I can medicate myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people do. They would choose to medicate themselves to deal with the pain. No, none of us like pain, right? Anybody like pain, raise your hand. So even from a physical standpoint, we take medication for pain. But from a mental health standpoint, a mental and emotional standpoint, we'll sit there and we'll try to do it. We won't get treatment for that. But as men, we'll endure that. We'll just hold it in and think that being a man is, not talking about it, not showing weakness, all those kind of things. And that's the opposite. We got to dispel those stigmas. The church is first is a good place to start dispelling those type of stigmas. I had a friend tell me the other day, said there's something kind of related, said, well, what's that thing you used to say, Kevin and down to a pop, snitches get what? Stitches. I'm at DLU, the snitches go home. They don't get no federal time. So I think here, we have to, share, tell it, find that accountability partner that can help us through. Because you don't know, your accountability partner may be going through the same thing neither one you talk about it, or something similar. You'll find that. Often in group therapy, we find that people are going through similar things. So get it. If you don't go, some people never go to a therapist because of the stigma. That's just going to happen. But places like this, more churches need to have man caves where men are discussing real men issues like this. Yes, sir. Any other questions?
All right, let's give Dr. Harold a hand. All right, we covered mental health. The Bible says He wants your soul to prosper. The Lord said He wants every part of you to prosper. So guess what? If you got good health and you got a whole lot of money in your pocket, but your mental health is destroyed and you're not, what good is that? And if you got good mental health and you got a whole lot of money in your pocket, but you are on a ventilator about to go, what good is that? One thing that I think a lot of times, and I say this and I introduce our next guest, is two things that I think we can relate with. Sometimes you can go to sleep and you can sleep all night and not get any rest. And sometimes you can have all the money in the world and not have an appetite to eat what you want. It's good to be able to go to sleep and get rest. And it's good to have an appetite and the money to have what you want. So as we think about our mental health, as Dr. Harold just spoke with us, we're going to now switch over and we're going to talk about our physical health. And I tell you, one of the things that you don't have to look very far to get is God has put, one thing we believe in First Baptist, everything that we need is in the building. If it's not in the building, then guess what? Somebody knows somebody that knows somebody to be able to get them in the building. So our next speaker, who's on a tight schedule, because like I said, he got lives to save, he got some stuff that he needs to do, is Dr. Dan Dishman. He's a board certified cardiologist. How many of y'all have your own cardiologist? Okay, well, by the end of the day, you can get with Dr. Dishman, where he can come to you, and if you need one, you can come up, but he's going to talk to us about our heart and about our health and about some of the things that we need to be doing, whether you're 35 or whether you're 85. It's Dr. Dishman.
All right, good morning. First and foremost, I want to say thanks for having me. I love this platform. I really, really hope it blows up and takes off. I think that men, especially African-American men, need this kind of forum to discuss healthcare issues and other issues that we may not otherwise be able to talk about. So again, thanks for having me, and you guys have a great platform here. I've enjoyed the last 15, 20 minutes I've been sitting here. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about cardiovascular health. I'm an interventional cardiologist, so what that means is I'm a cardiologist first. So I do all the general cardiology stuff, the EKGs and stress tests and read echocardiograms and treat high blood pressure and congestive heart failure, but also I intervene. So some doctors like to call us glorified plumbers. That's because we're mostly known for clearing out blockages. So that blockage can be in the arteries that feed the brain, the arteries that feed the heart, arteries that feed the legs. So wherever there's a blockage, where a wire will travel, so will I. So we clear out those blockages using balloons, stents, other fancy technologies that we have available to us. But aside from that, heart attacks and strokes and high blood pressure. Those are the bread and butter of what I treat. So in regard to some of the risk factors, I'm sure you're aware of those things as well. You know, high blood pressure, diabetes, smoking, high cholesterol. Then we have other things that we can't control, like family history. As we get older, there's a predilection for males that have more disease than females, etc. So when we talk about those things that we can control, like high blood pressure, diabetes, at the top of the list is going to be diet. And that's something that I don't think is emphasized enough, the importance of diet. Diet has more than a 50% share in regard to our health, be it cardiovascular and otherwise. But exercise is another thing that needs to be stressed a lot more. The current recommendation is for there to be at least 5 to 6 days a week of at least 30 to 45 minutes of aerobic exercise. That's like walking, running, jogging, playing some type of physical sport. So at least 30 to 45 minutes, 5 to 6 days a week for that. And those things will contribute to decreasing the prevalence of high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, and at least make your numbers look better. But how do you make those numbers look better if you don't know what those numbers are? So when asked if those that are in had a cardiologist, I saw about 3 people raise their hand. And it doesn't mean that you have to have a cardiologist, but how many people in the house have a general practitioner? An intern? Okay, so that's more like, that's pretty much everyone. Because you have to know where you stand to know where you are as far as your risk profile. So you need to know what your blood pressure is, you need to know what your cholesterol is, what your hemoglobin A1C is, that's the index to tell us how well your blood sugar has been treated over about the last 3 months. So you have to know where you stand to know what your risk profile is and what testing things should be done to evaluate things further. But I can go up all day talking about cardiology. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here more for you all. So I think that we'll do a lot better if I entertain questions that you may have in regard to cardiology or cardiovascular health.
How you doing, Doctor?
Doing great.
All right, I got a couple of questions for you. One, I've got high blood pressure, I'm a diabetic, I've got GERD, I've got a bad back, and so the difficult part. I got it all. I inherited it all. So the question I have is, because being a diabetic for all like, one of the things I have, and my liver my numbers are elevated. So I'm 3 out of 4, coming from good to bad. So I'm in a clinical study as we speak, trying to figure out what's causing my numbers to rise. The problem that I have is I don't know exactly, even as a diabetic, what are the proper nutritional foods that we can eat? I mean, because you can go to the store, and you think you're grabbing some fruits, and the diabetic can't even eat too much of that because it has sugar in it. So it's just like the diabetic can't eat anything.
Right.
So that's my question. What is the diet that an individual trying to stay healthy? What would they need to be looking at? Do I need to go get some book or something that you can recommend, or I don't know?
Well, it's relatively fundamental in regard to diabetic, especially is that diabetes is the inability of the heart, the inability of the body to treat sugar levels. So the body doesn't produce enough insulin in order to take the sugars in the body and allow them to be transformed into usable energy. So number one is a diabetic has to have adequate insulin sources, so be it internal or external. So most diabetics have external sources which come in the form of insulin. Some diabetics are better controlled and can have their internal sources better utilized by using some other medications that you can take by mouth. But a lot of diabetics have to have some external source in the form of insulin. But as far as foods are concerned, diabetics have to avoid or at least minimize carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are basically the complex forms of sugars. So all form of sugar. So the more complex carbohydrates are going to be your breads and your wheats and things like that. The wheats are going to be better because they're not processed, but the breads are processed, and so the carbohydrates are less complex and therefore turn into sugar more quickly. So you're going to want to avoid sugars, even natural sugars, because again, those aren't complex. And they are converted to sugar almost immediately that the body can't utilize because there's not enough insulin. Complex carbohydrates is going to be things like, raw wheat, oats, sweet potatoes, things of that nature. But even like you mentioned, fruit have natural sugars. You want to also focus on vegetables. Vegetables have a lot less sugar than fruit and are also satiable, so they make you feel full. But you have to eat a lot of them. We know that too. But the body's going to be more able to utilize its own insulin and be able to break down more sugars with exercise. So again, exercise is a big emphasis on overall health across the board, be it diabetic or not. Now, people talk about diets and things a lot in regard to losing weight. And you have this diet and that diet, and you have hundreds of different diets out there. The best diet is very simple formula. Calories in versus calories out. That's what every diet known to man boils down to. When we talk about weight loss versus weight gain, if you take in more calories than you burn, what happens?
Gain.
You gain weight. If you burn more calories than you take in, you lose weight. It's that simple. It really is that simple. So if you go today and you eat a burger and fries and 2 slices of pizza and a milkshake, and you take in 4,000 calories, and you only burn 500 from walking back and forth, throughout the day, and you're gonna gain some weight. But if you go to some high intensity workout today and you burn 1,500 calories throughout the day, and you maybe had just a burger, which may be 1,700 calories, you'll still lose weight even though you had a burger, but you burn more calories than you took in. So weight loss versus weight gain is a very, very simple formula. So you don't have to do all of these crazy diets. Women are especially notorious for it. They're gonna drink the juice of cabbage for 7 days, to go to a wedding next week. I mean, it's not,
So that thing I was just in the Bible, I got home, that gallon of stuff that lose 20 pounds, I don't even buy it.
You don't even have to buy it, man. You don't even have to buy it.
How you doing? My name is Kendall. Years ago, I read a book called Eating According to Your Blood Type. Has there been more research on that? And is there an impact on comorbidities, especially among Black men when it comes to our blood type? Is that something we should consider?
That's a great question, and there's definitely some meat on that bone, so to speak. There's more research being done in that regard, but there's not enough research that I'm aware of for me to speak intelligently about it. But from what I know, there is some research in regard to, or some data in regard to blood type versus a particular diet and being predisposed to certain comorbidities. But again, I can't speak intelligently about it to say what's what, but I've come across the same thing.
Okay. See, Doc, I'm getting my steps in.
Oh yeah. You probably burned about 12 calories just right there.
My name is Kevin. I have a question. Heart disease runs in my family on both sides, mom and dad. So I was told about, my dad had a heart attack, he was like 42, but he ate a lot of red meat. So I was told that, to minimize your red meat. So when they say minimize, what do you think? Because I like hamburgers, I like steak, and they even told us eating some pork, because every now and then I like a grilled pork chop, not a fried pork chop.
Okay, yeah, so number one, cholesterol only comes from meat products. So if you're predisposed to heart disease, you definitely want to keep a close check on your cholesterol. It only comes from meat products. So, meat, milk, butter, anything that comes from an animal has got cholesterol in it. So you want to be leery of those things no matter what the meat is. Red meat tends to have a higher per ounce amount of cholesterol, and that's why red meat is considered to be worse. If you're going to do red meat, do filet mignon. If you're going to do filet mignon, try not to do more than 6 ounces at a time. But you definitely stay away from the ribeyes of the world. That's the most fat. And it's the most flavor too, I know.
So the ice cream is not good.
Ice cream definitely is not good. If you look at the cholesterol content on alcohol, I read a lot of labels, and I advise you guys to do the same. Read a lot of labels. We have the calorie counts on a lot of menus and things now. Utilize those things. But when you're shopping, look at the labels. It'll tell you, how much cholesterol, how much sugars. Look at the serving size. The serving sizes are a lot smaller than you think on a lot of these things. For ice cream, it's a half a cup. It's not even a whole cup. When you talk about the serving, who eats a half a cup of ice cream at a time? But utilize these things to help you make more informed decisions, because it could be a matter of life or death, really. Again, especially if you have a familial predisposition to heart disease, and you may have cholesterol issues.
Actually, when you said that, I think Kevin asked the question about the red meat. That's one of the things I think I may have mentioned when you came in. I actually had a heart attack back in 2019, and really couldn't understand how I had it because I pretty much was basically a vegetarian. I didn't eat meat pretty much at all, So I didn't have red meat. I stopped eating red meat years ago, and couldn't understand where it came from to the doctors in Colorado. I had 100% blockage in the main artery. And of course, they said I shouldn't walk in the hospital, of course, but they, and what I found out, it was a lot of the dairy type products that caused a lot of the blockage. And ice cream was I had to have ice cream every day.
I was that guy too.
Every day. I didn't realize I had done that much of it, but I'm asking, is because the cholesterol the content of cholesterol that's contained in ice cream, is that what created the plaque or the blockage or whatever in the main artery?
Right, and that's exactly what it was. So the foundation for all cardiovascular diseases is atherosclerotic disease, and that's built on atherosclerosis. So atherosclerosis is that buildup of plaque. Not much different than what you see in your plaques at home. When things build up, and then you get water and things to back up, and nothing's flowing forward, right? So the same thing happens in the vessels of the body. So you get that sludge, the cholesterol things that build up in the linings of the arteries, and then it just gets thicker and thicker, and then the lumen gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and it eventually blocks off completely. Or before it blocks off completely, a lot of times you have symptoms that tell you that the flow is getting less and less and less, and that's usually in the form of chest pain or shortness of breath, most commonly. But you can have other symptoms as well, such as fatigue, tiredness, inability to sleep, and things like that. And when we're talking about cholesterol, usually we only talk about the bad cholesterol, because the bad cholesterol is what gives us more of the issues, more of the consequences that we see every day with strokes and heart attacks. But we don't talk about the good cholesterol enough either. There are only two things that can raise your good cholesterol, because the good cholesterol eats bad cholesterol. So the more good cholesterol you have, the better. So the more good cholesterol you have, you can lower your bad cholesterol. So there's only two things that can increase your good cholesterol. Anybody know what those two things are? Exercise is one.
Right.
It's something that you can ingest. Not water. Close. you turn water into what?
Wine.
Wine.
You know that already.
So exercise and wine, particularly red wine, and even more particularly Pinot Noir. So exercise, red wine, only two things that can increase your HDL or your good cholesterol. So you guys just got a free tip to drink red wine.
Dr. Bishop, my name is Craig. I got a couple of questions. Question number one is, if you could talk to us about the frequency or how often, even if you don't have any signs of any heart problems, heart disease, or anything, how often, when you go see cardiologists, how often should you, or your PCP, how often should you request an EKG be done? I know a lot of times it depends on insurance and what they'll pay, but how often should you suggest, doing that, requesting it? And then secondly, how often should men have stress tests done? And then I'll have another one after this.
Okay. Now, two great questions. I usually get at least 1 EKG a year, and that only changes if the patient has symptoms that change. So if you come and see me, this month and you're totally fine, we get an EKG, and I see you 6 months from now, and you don't have any issues at all, we won't do another one until the following year. But if you come today and we get an EKG, and you come back in 3 months because you're feeling short of breath, we're gonna get an EKG again. But in general, 1 EKG a year is plenty in the absence of any symptoms. In regard to stress tests, once upon a time they used to do stress tests every year, like EKGs, but they found out that was essentially a waste of resources and money. So now we say that stress tests, again, in the absence of new symptoms, is good for 5 years. So if you get a stress test today, and you don't have anything else for at least another 5 years, we don't do another one. But if symptoms change, so do our recommendations. So it's really predicated upon the patient, and each one of those is individualized, but in general, 1 EKG per year, and in general, stress test is good for at least 5 years.
And then my final question is the correlation between, because I was just recently diagnosed with moderate sleep apnea, and for a while, I was having problems sleeping and staying asleep and those type of things until I recently did, the little sleep test and that type of thing. And so, how does that, and basically what I'm doing is encouraging men, if you ever have any problems, is, to make sure you go get checked out. But the correlation between that moderate sleep apnea and the effect on your heart, breathing, and all of that, can you share a little bit about that?
Well, sleep apnea is hugely related to 3 things. Number 1 is high blood pressure, number 2 is obesity, and number 3 is congestive heart failure. So those things are heavily related to sleep apnea. Sleep apnea also has some correlation to heart attacks. And a lot of that has to do with disruption of the circadian rhythm. So, the body, thinks it's supposed to be sleeping and it's awake, and vice versa a lot of times. So, and then with that, you have the disruption of, hormones and other things, and it just makes things haywire in regard to the proper function of the body in general, but also the heart doesn't like that. So it predisposes you to things such as heart attacks, but very strong correlation with obesity, high blood pressure, and congestive heart failure in regard to sleep apnea. So if you have any of those conditions, you want to be evaluated for sleep apnea. And on the flip side, if you have sleep apnea, you want to be evaluated for those conditions as well.
Question. My name is David, and I'd like to know how many cocktails can you have in a day? I've had some doctors say, well, you can have one.
No, very, very fair question. So it's one.
Your answer may get you a couple more patients. So.
No, 1 drink of spirits, drink is 2 ounces, okay? So 1 drink of spirits, 2 beers, 2 glasses of wine for men. So that's what's allowed per day, believe it or not. That's considered to be heart healthy. For women is 1 drink of spirits, 1 ounce, 1 beer, 1 glass of wine. And 1 glass of wine is 4 ounces, not 8. We have some big pours.
And we work with, you just tell us how many, don't worry about the ounces. We're counting our own ounces.
So your 1 beer is not a 40 ounce. Yeah, 1 beer is 12 ounces. So there's 2 spirits, 1 glass of spirits, 2 beers, and 2 glasses of wine. For this group.
Okay, my name is Alan Myers, and I got a question about CT scans. What's the purpose of the CT scan, or what are you looking for when you have a CT scan?
Well, CT scan is a fairly non-invasive way of evaluating organs within the body. So I say fairly non-invasive because you have to get an IV in order to give contrast and things. But it's our way of looking inside the body to see if there's anything abnormal, if there's anything larger than it should be, if there's anything that's present that shouldn't be present, if there's blood where blood shouldn't be. So it's our way of looking inside the body without actually opening you up or putting wires and catheters and things inside. So that's what the CT scan allows us to do.
I have a question and a comment. My first question is, are you part of a Methodist group?
I am.
You are? Right on. And my comment is, the gentleman has been talking about ice cream. And what I learned about ice cream years ago is that it causes stones. Your gallstones or your kidney stones. That's what my diagnosis was. Calcium.
A lot of fat. A lot of fat in ice cream as well. Yeah. So good, right?
Is sherbet the same as ice cream?
No, sherbet and sorbet are way different than ice cream. So that's a great question. Sherbets and sorbets typically don't have milk. So they're a lot safer in regard to, from a health standpoint. And a lot less fat as well. But you have to watch the sugar content in sorbets and sherbet and sorbet.
And what about the TCB, ice cream?
Yogurts you have to be careful with too because they do have, a lot of times they do have milk in it. They have less fat usually, but they kind of compensate with more sugar as well. But as far as, sorbet is going to be the safest one.
Are you taking patients?
Yes.
Yeah, I told you that.
How do you go about doing that?
You can call 901-395-2620. And just tell them who you are, that you met me, and when you'd like to come in.
All right, thank you.
If you don't want to wait until December, tell them you're my uncle.
What's the problem with milk? My daughter been telling me for years, Daddy, quit drinking milk. So I cut back. I go to 2% milk now, but she's got this stigma about milk.
Well, the stigma is born out of, it's cholesterol in milk, there's fat in milk, and there's a lot of lactose in milk too. And 75 to 80% of us are lactose intolerant after the age of 35. But the stigma, I think it's just that it's more of a stigma than anything. It's not that, that milk in and of itself is tied to more heart disease or more strokes or heart attacks. Not in and of itself, no. Almond milk is better. So all the plant-based milks are better. The only thing about soy milk you have to be concerned about is estrogen in soy. So those men who may drink a lot of soy milk may have this something called gynecomastia, where the breasts tend to get bigger. So you have to be careful with that with soy milk, but almond milk is a great choice. It's what I drink, and it tastes good to me too, and I don't like milk.
I think one of the things you said in the earlier part of your presentation that I think you skipped over a lot when you said it's more about what you eat, and it's about eating the right things and knowing what are you putting into your body, because you can go to the gym every day and work out, but what you say, if you put more calories in and then you burn it off, then it's not going. I think we all need to be a little bit more cognizant of what we're eating, what we're putting into our body, in the contents of that. And they've done a great job by making them label food, because a lot of times people think they're buying fat-free and all this other stuff, but when you look at it, you might as well look. If you're going to use margarine, man, look, you might as well use 2 sticks of butter when you get through. So I think one of the things that we have to do, we have to be more conscious about the decisions that we make when we're eating and when we're doing what we're doing. Is just stuff say, well, we're eating this. A lot of times you don't have to just say, I'm gonna stop it, but every now and then you need to cut back. And being able to cut back, and I think that you rarely hear people say exercise, but I think really what caught my attention to you is eating is 50% of what you do.
Oh yeah, it's at least 50%. And like I was saying earlier, read labels. I read a lot of labels, and when we're in restaurants, you have the calorie counts on a lot of things. I may want the onion rings and the burger with the bacon and the fried egg, but you have to make choices in there, and sometimes I may not get the onion rings. A lot of times I don't get fries. Obviously I like to eat, obviously, but you just have to make decisions a lot of times that you have to be your best advocate in regard to your own health. I can preach to you all day about all the stuff you need to do, but you have to take some responsibility and some accountability for yourself. And if you know that you're going to eat 3,000 calories tonight, just be prepared the next day to bang it out on the treadmill or in the gym or whatever you need to do. You have to weigh these things, and make it a habit to weigh these things. Everybody's gonna splurge every now and again, but you can't splurge every day. You've got people splurging all day, every day, and that's where you get into trouble. Most things in moderation are okay, but you just can't go crazy every day, and that's the thing.
Well, I know you're on a tight schedule, but as you get ready to wrap up, if you could just give a couple of nuggets that you say, hey, what are some of the things that you really, I know the count of food, but what are some things that you can really do to stave off heart health, to stave off just bad health? What are some things that we can incorporate into our daily lives that we can start doing that can help us and prevent some of the things that can come down the road?
Yeah, I would say make a commitment to be more active. Even if you are active, make a commitment to be even more active, because that really is, I think, the best thing that I can recommend to you, better than anything I can prescribe. No question about that, is being active. Park farther away from, the entranceway to wherever you're going, be it work, the grocery store, church, park farther away. Walk the longer distance, take the stairs. Make an extra trip around the house. Just little things that you can incorporate that don't cost you anything to burn an extra 10 to 15 calories. Walk around the big room with a microphone. Little things that you can do to make your life a little easier. And probably the biggest thing is find ways to mitigate your stress. People don't I think, really appreciate how much stress deteriorates your overall health, not just your mental health, but your physical health. But with that being said, activity helps you to mitigate that. The more active you are, it helps burn some of that negative energy as well. It helps take some of the stress away. You know, if a situation is stressing you out, find a way to, you know, get away from this situation as best you can, or minimize your exposure to it. So, be as active as possible, try to minimize your stress, and I can pretty much assure you add days to your life.
That's good, because that's one of the things, like, some days I don't feel like walking. You know, one of the things that help me is the smart watches, so to tell me and to keep up. And we have a group, accountability group with about 6 people in it, and we check on people. And, you know, we have some people we have to say, we need to see a receipt. Don't just text us and say you walked 8,000 miles. You need to show us a receipt. But one of the things that Pastor Freeman has me doing now, look, I may not want to walk every day. Oh, but I don't want to play golf every day. So now now we walk. We like the old men at the golf course. So now we walk 9 holes at least 4 or 5 days a week. So, you know, my step count is through the roof. Because look, while I may not want to go upstairs and get on my treadmill, if somebody tells me we can pick up 9 holes, guess what? I go to the golf course. So that's to your point. Find ways to just get it done.
Oh, yes.
What's your name and number again?
First name is Dwight.
Hold on. Everybody get your phones out.
First name is Dwight, D-W-I-G-H-T. Last name Dishman, D as in dollar, I-S-H-M-O-N.
I knew when you said 3 beers, 5 glasses of wine. Did you tell me you're supposed to sit out?
And occasionally.
Occasionally. You just picked up 3 more.
It's 901-395-2620.
You got the mental health doctor say he's gonna come to you, man.
Oh yeah, 901-395-2620.
One more time, 3620?
395-2620, 2620.
The last name?
Dishman,
Bishop.
D-I-S-H-M-O-N.
And Dr. Dishman, we really thank you. We know you had a lot of stuff going on. You dressed for work, look like you got some lives.
Oh yeah, there's a phone ring to say that.
But look, one of the things we're gonna do, we just want to give you a token of appreciation. We just want to give you a token of appreciation for coming out and hanging with us. And this is what I tell people. Whether you get 3 men together, whether you get 30 men together, when men come together and disseminate information, there's change that's gonna happen. So we're excited that you came. Let's give Dr. Dishman a hand.
Well, I want to say happy Juneteenth to everyone. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers in the room. And I just want to give you one bad dad joke. Did you guys know that 10 plus 10 and 11 plus 11 are the same thing? What's 10 plus 10? What's 11 plus 11?
22.
22.
I think, did you need the number? One more time, the number.
901-395-2620.
I missed that joke.
22.
Yeah,
As President Norman said, you're catching on the way home. Yeah. You're going to be turning in the driveway like, oh, that's what he was saying.
It's 22.
Oh,
You were the legendary. Brother Grant, can you come and bless our food for us? We have some box lunches, and as you can tell, they set the pool table up. There's 2 pool tables in here. We don't want nobody to go back to your loan sharking days, but we just want you to have no side bits going on the pool table. So we're gonna have Deacon pray for bless the lunch. We'll eat lunch, and then the pool tables. There's some big wheels and spades, and there's some checkers and some dominoes, and y'all don't even want to go over there and mess around with the pudding. Just stay from over there, because it won't be good for you.
Thanks, Cameron. I got some big wish lists for you.
We already know what you do.
Man, y'all been good for me. I didn't just see it. Let's bow our head. Our Father and our God, we just come to thank you, Father. Thank you for this opportunity for all of us to come together. Thank you for the information, for the men who took their time to come out and share with us. This time we ask you to bless the food that we're about to receive for the nourishment of our body. And we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
And to our internet audience, we thank you guys for tuning in. We wish you were here. The next time we have an event, please RSVP and let us know so you can get here because we want to see your face in the place. We'll eat lunch and then we'll continue on.
Ha 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 ha!